The Galactic Federation's grand celebration burst into life on Viridian, a planet adorned with lush landscapes and shimmering cities. Towering spires gleamed in the sun, reflecting a kaleidoscope of colors as delegates from across the galaxy mingled amidst the festivities. The air was electric with excitement, rich with the scents of exotic foods and the sounds of alien music, an eclectic blend of rhythms and melodies that drew beings from every corner of the cosmos. Ambassador Sarah Holt stood at the edge of the central plaza, her keen gaze sweeping over the throngs of vibrant attendees. Humans had only recently secured their place in the Federation, and she felt the weight of their unproven status. While other species displayed their heritage with pride, Sarah sensed an unspoken divide. Humans were still seen as newcomers, their contributions overshadowed by centuries of alien alliances. As she adjusted the lapel of her tailored diplomatic uniform, a flash of movement caught her eye. A small group of delegates from the Regulian collective whispered fervently, their expressions tense. Curiosity piqued, Sarah edged closer, her ears straining to catch snippets of their conversation. Words like betrayal and war floated through the air, igniting a flicker of concern in her chest. Ambassador Holt. A cheerful voice broke her focus. It was Darnak, a tall, four-armed delegate from the Xylorian Alliance, his bright blue skin shimmering under the lights. "You must try the fried gasroot. It's exquisite." He handed her a plate, his multiple eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Thank you, Darnak," she replied, forcing a smile. "It looks delicious." But her thoughts lingered on the Regulians. She excused herself and moved back into the crowd, her mind racing. As the festivities continued, performers from various species showcased their unique talents. A group of luminescent Aetherians danced gracefully, their bodies shifting colors with each movement, while a band of Krathian musicians played a haunting melody that resonated deep within the souls of onlookers. Laughter and cheers filled the air, but Sarah's heart remained heavy. Just then, a loud explosion erupted from the far side of the plaza. The ground shook beneath her feet, sending her stumbling. Gasps and screams pierced the jubilant atmosphere, replaced by a wave of panic. Sarah's instincts kicked in as she steadied herself. "Stay calm. Evacuate toward the exits," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She sprinted toward the source of the explosion, dodging falling debris and desperate crowds. As she reached the edge of the square, her heart sank at the sight before her. A group of armed attackers, their features obscured by masks, advanced through the chaos, firing indiscriminately into the air. Sarah's mind raced. Who were they? What did they want? Suddenly, she spotted a small figure, a Rigelian child, trapped beneath a collapsed stand, its alien eyes wide with terror. Without hesitation, Sarah dashed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hang on. I'm coming," she yelled, pushing aside the debris with every ounce of strength. The shouts of the attackers faded into the background, replaced by the child's whimpers. Just as she managed to free the child, a shot rang out, narrowly missing her. Adrenaline surged through her veins, igniting a fierce determination. She would not let fear dictate the outcome of this day. As chaos reigned around her, she vowed to find justice, not just for the child she saved, but for the peace they all sought to protect. The moment Sarah freed the Rigelian child from the rubble, she felt a surge of relief wash over her, but it was fleeting. The chaos continued to unfold around them, screams piercing the air as delegates scrambled for safety. Sarah quickly tucked the child behind her, using her body as a shield. "Stay close to me," she urged, her heart racing. The child nodded, wide-eyed and trembling. Just then, a sharp crack echoed through the plaza, followed by another explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. The festive atmosphere had transformed into a war zone, and Sarah's instincts kicked into high gear. She couldn't allow panic to take hold of her or those around her. "Over there," she shouted, pointing toward a nearby building that offered shelter. "We need to get to safety." With the child clinging to her side, Sarah navigated through the throngs of frightened aliens, shouting words of encouragement. "You're doing great. Just keep moving." The crowd surged forward, but the masked attackers pursued relentlessly, firing into the air to intimidate. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah spotted Darnak and a few other humans who had rallied together, their faces grim. Darnak waved her over, his multiple arms gesturing frantically. "We need to regroup. They're hitting the southern exit next." As they made their way toward Darnak, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Who were these attackers? And what was their goal? The Rigelian child pressed against her, whimpering softly, a reminder of the stakes at hand. "Gather everyone," Sarah instructed the group, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "We need to establish a safe point and figure out a plan." The humans quickly set about organizing the scattered delegates, directing them toward a nearby building that had a strong, reinforced structure. Sarah led the charge, the child still at her side, as the others formed a protective barrier around them. Inside the building, the atmosphere was tense. Delegates from various species huddled together, exchanging fearful glances. Sarah's heart sank as she caught sight of a few injured beings, their wounds a stark reminder of the attack's brutality. "Listen up," Sarah commanded, raising her voice above the murmurs. "We're not going to let fear win. We need to gather our forces and communicate with the Federation. If we stand together, we can fight back." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but doubt lingered in the air. A Xylorian delegate stepped forward, his voice quivering. "But what if they breach our defenses? We're outnumbered." Sarah met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "Then we use our strengths. We are diverse. Each of our species brings something unique to the table. We need to leverage that. Gather your resources and prepare to defend this position." As delegates began to whisper among themselves, Sarah turned her attention to a console in the corner of the room. If she could establish a communication link with the Federation, they might stand a chance of getting reinforcements, or at least guidance. "Darnak, help me with this," she called out, her fingers flying over the controls. "We need to send a distress signal. They need to know what's happening here." Together, they worked furiously, entering codes and bypassing security protocols. The sounds of distant gunfire and explosions echoed through the walls, a constant reminder of the danger outside. Just as they made progress, the screen flickered, displaying a grainy image of the chaos outside. "Here," Sarah exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "Look, we need to gather intel. We can't just react blindly." Suddenly, the building shuddered as a blast struck nearby. The lights flickered, and the room went dark for a heartbeat before emergency lights flickered on. The panicked murmurs intensified. "Stay calm," Sarah shouted, her heart racing. "We're going to get through this, together." But even as she spoke, a chilling realization washed over her. The attackers were not just targeting the celebration. They were sending a message. And it was one that could threaten the fragile peace the Federation had fought so hard to achieve. The fight for justice had just begun. As the emergency lights cast an eerie glow over the room, Sarah's mind raced. They were trapped in a building with no clear idea of what lay beyond its walls. The distant sounds of chaos reverberated, a grim reminder of the world outside. She focused on the task at hand, determined to piece together the puzzle that surrounded the attack. "Darnak, keep an eye on the exits," Sarah instructed, her fingers dancing across the console. "I'm going to try to access their security feeds. We need to know what we're dealing with." Darnak nodded, his multiple arms poised for action. As Sarah worked, she felt a mix of urgency and fear. The child from earlier clung to her side, eyes wide with terror. She offered a reassuring smile, but deep inside, she felt the weight of responsibility for everyone in the room. The screen flickered again as Sarah finally managed to tap into the security feeds. Static crackled before images began to form, a chaotic montage of masked attackers moving through the plaza, some setting fires while others chased fleeing delegates. She quickly scanned the footage, searching for any clues about their identities or motives. "There," Darnek exclaimed, pointing at one of the masked figures. "Look at their insignia." On the screen, an emblem flashed briefly before it was obscured by the chaos, a twisted serpent wrapped around a star. Sarah's heart sank. She recognized the insignia from her studies, a symbol of the Caldari Syndicate, a notorious organization known for its ruthless tactics in the pursuit of power and profit. "They're not just random attackers," Sarah said, her voice firm. "This is an organized strike. The Caldari Syndicate has been trying to destabilize the Federation for years, hoping to profit from the ensuing chaos. They must see this celebration as an opportunity." As the realization sank in, the room filled with murmurs of disbelief and fear. A Xylorian delegate stepped forward, his voice trembling. "What do we do now? If they're here to send a message, what will happen next?" "We fight back," Sarah replied, her tone resolute. "But first, we need to understand their plan. They won't stop at this attack. They'll aim for key targets throughout the Federation. We need to gather intelligence and report back to the Council." "But how?" another delegate asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "We're stuck here." Sarah paused, considering their options. "We need to establish communication with any allies still at the celebration. If we can reach them, we might be able to coordinate a counteroffensive." Darnek's eyes lit up. "There are emergency channels for interspecies communication. We could send a signal to anyone still operational outside." "Good thinking," Sarah replied, adrenaline surging. "Let's set it up." As they scrambled to send out the distress signal, the sound of gunfire intensified outside. The distant booms were punctuated by terrified shouts, sending ripples of panic through the delegates huddled in the room. Every moment felt like an eternity, but Sarah was determined not to let fear overcome them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the screen blinked back to life and a connection established. The faces of human soldiers appeared, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. "Ambassador Holt, we've received your distress signal. What's the situation?" One soldier, Captain Jameson, asked urgently. "We're under attack by the Caldari Syndicate," Sarah explained quickly. "They're attempting to disrupt the peace celebration. We need reinforcements immediately and intel on their movements." "Understood. We're assembling a team and will be there as soon as we can," Jameson replied, his gaze steady. "Hold your position and do not engage unless absolutely necessary." As they ended the call, a new wave of determination surged through Sarah. They had allies on the way, but it would take time. In the meantime, they needed to prepare for the worst. "Gather whatever supplies you can find," she ordered, her voice steady. "We need to be ready in case they breach our defenses. We'll fortify our position and stay alert." The delegates sprang into action, grabbing makeshift weapons and barricading doors. Sarah watched as fear turned into resolve, the spirit of cooperation igniting even in the darkest moments. They were all fighting for the same cause, to protect the fragile peace that had brought them together. As the sounds of chaos continued outside, Sarah stood tall, ready to confront whatever came next. Justice was within reach, and she would not let the Caldari Syndicate's attack define the outcome of this day. The fight was just beginning. The atmosphere inside the building crackled with tension as Sarah and the delegates prepared for the worst. Armed with makeshift weapons and a renewed sense of purpose, they fortified their defenses, determined to hold their ground until reinforcements arrived. But as the echoes of gunfire reverberated outside, she knew that survival alone wasn't enough. They needed a united front to counter the Caldari Syndicate's assault. "Darnek, I need you to coordinate with the other delegates," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Gather any leaders still with us and find out what resources they can mobilize." "On it," Darnek replied, his multiple arms moving efficiently as he set off to rally the group. Meanwhile, Sarah turned her attention back to the console, searching for any additional information that might aid their cause. A series of alerts flickered across the screen, indicating the locations of other groups that had been able to maintain communication. If she could reach them, they might be able to form a coalition against the attackers. As she worked, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of potential allies. The celebration had brought together many different species, but old prejudices and rivalries still simmered beneath the surface. Now was the time to put aside differences for the greater good. Everyone. Sarah called, raising her voice to capture the attention of the gathered delegates. We need to unite if we want to survive this attack. The Caldari Syndicate thrives on chaos and division, and if we allow fear to dictate our actions, they will succeed. A murmur of uncertainty spread through the crowd, but Sarah pressed on. Think of what's at stake. Our homes, our families, and our future as members of the Galactic Federation. We can't let this be how our story ends. As she spoke, she noticed the Xylorian delegate from earlier, his face pale but determined. He stepped forward. Ambassador, you're right. We have to put our differences aside. The Syndicate is a threat to all of us. What do you propose? We reach out to other groups, Sarah replied, her heart pounding with urgency. If we can establish a united front, we can counter their forces. Darnak is already rallying our allies, but we need to be strategic. Just then, Darnak returned, a mix of excitement and urgency on his face. I've managed to contact a few of the leaders who are still operational. They're ready to meet and discuss forming a coalition. However, they're hesitant without proof of our strength. Sarah nodded, understanding the sentiment. We need to show them that we're capable of defending ourselves, even in this precarious situation. If we can hold our ground here and repel any attacks, we'll prove our resolve. Then let's prepare, the Xylorian delegate urged. We can set up a defense perimeter. If the Syndicate tries to breach this building, we'll make them regret it. The delegates sprang into action, securing doors and windows while formulating a plan. Sarah assigned roles, designating groups to handle defenses, communication, and emergency medical aid for the injured. She could feel the tide of fear slowly shifting to a sense of solidarity as everyone found their purpose. As they worked, the sound of an explosion rocked the building, followed by frantic shouts. Sarah's heart raced. Stay focused. We're in this together. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, they were ready. A mix of delegates stood shoulder to shoulder, a diverse array of species uniting for a common cause. Let's send a message to the Caldari, Sarah declared, her voice steady. We're not going to be easy targets. We will stand together, no matter what. With a final nod, the delegates took their positions, hearts pounding in unison. As the doors creaked under the weight of the attackers outside, Sarah felt a spark of hope. They were no longer isolated. They were a coalition, ready to fight for their homes and their future. Here they come, a delegate shouted, peering out a window. Sarah squared her shoulders, adrenaline surging. This was it. The fight for justice was about to begin, and they would face it together. The Caldari Syndicate had underestimated the spirit of the Federation, and Sarah was determined to show them just how wrong they were. The air grew thick with tension as the sound of pounding footsteps echoed closer. Sarah's heart raced, but she steeled herself, glancing around at the determined faces of her fellow delegates. They were ready to stand firm against the impending assault, united in purpose. Remember your training, she called out, trying to instill confidence in her allies. We defend this position and protect each other. We've come too far to let fear win. As the doors shook violently from the force of the attackers, Sarah took her place at the front, alongside Darnak and the Xylorian delegate. They had fortified their defenses as best they could, but she knew they would need to be smart about how they engage. Darnak, you and your team cover the windows, Sarah instructed. Use whatever you can find to create barriers. I want a clear line of sight to the courtyard. The delegates sprang into action, using tables, crates, and anything heavy enough to create makeshift barricades. Sarah felt a surge of pride. Their determination was palpable, transforming the room from a refuge into a fortress. The door splintered with another violent strike, and Sarah prepared herself. Hold your positions, she shouted, eyes trained on the entryway. Just then, the door burst open, and a group of masked attackers flooded in, weapons raised. Chaos erupted as the delegates instinctively moved to defend themselves. The first few attackers were met with a volley of makeshift projectiles. Chairs, crates, anything that could be thrown. Sarah's heart raced as she grabbed a metal pipe, ready to join the fray. "Push them back," she yelled, swinging the pipe with all her strength at the nearest attacker. It connected with a solid thud, and the masked figure staggered back, momentarily disoriented. The room devolved into a whirlwind of movement, shouts, and clashing metal. Sarah fought alongside her allies, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Each blow she landed felt like a small victory, a testament to their collective strength. Darnak, wielding a heavy metal rod, moved gracefully among the attackers, his multiple limbs allowing him to navigate the chaos with surprising agility. Just as they began to gain the upper hand, a new wave of attackers stormed in from behind, having breached a side entrance. The realization hit Sarah like a cold wave. They were being flanked. "Fall back to the rear," she shouted, trying to maintain order amidst the chaos. "Regroup near the console." As the delegates scrambled to retreat, Sarah grabbed a few nearby delegates, urging them to create a defensive line around the console. "We need to hold this position," she yelled, her voice barely rising above the din. With everyone in place, they managed to fend off the initial surge of attackers. Sarah glanced at the screen, its flickering images showing the turmoil outside. Reinforcements were still en route, but time felt like it was slipping away. "Darnak, can you re-establish that communication link?" she asked, urgency lacing her tone. "I'll try," he replied, quickly moving back to the console. Sarah covered him, using the pipe to deflect an incoming attack from a masked figure trying to breach their defenses. As the battle raged on, she caught sight of the Xylorian delegate helping an injured Krathian. It filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. They were all fighting for their survival, and every moment spent defending their position was a moment closer to freedom. Finally, Darnak shouted, "I've got it. The link is reestablished. Send out the coordinates of our location." Sarah instructed, her heart pounding with hope. "We need to inform them of the situation." Darnak worked furiously, fingers flying over the console as Sarah continued to fend off attackers. Just then, she spotted the unmistakable insignia of the Caldari Syndicate emblazoned on one of the attackers' uniforms. It confirmed her fears. The Syndicate was fully invested in this assault, and they would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. The realization fueled her resolve. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for the very soul of the Federation. And as long as they stood together, they would not back down. "Hold strong," Sarah yelled, rallying her allies. "Justice is on our side. We will not let them win." The fight raged on, and Sarah felt the weight of every swing, every dodge, every desperate moment as the Caldari attackers pressed against their defenses. Darnak, still working at the console, shouted over the chaos, "I'm trying to get a signal out. Just a few more moments." The air was thick with smoke and tension. Each clash of metal reverberated through the room, a harsh reminder of the stakes they were facing. Sarah could feel fatigue setting in, but she pushed it aside, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate need to protect her allies. "Keep it together," she yelled, deflecting another blow aimed at her head. "We're holding them off." Just as she landed a solid hit against another attacker, she saw Darnak's expression shift from concentration to alarm. "Sarah, I think I've found something. Now's not the time for distractions." She shot back, instinctively blocking an incoming strike from another masked assailant. "No, really." "The communications feed," Darnak urged, his voice rising above the chaos. "I'm picking up an internal Caldari signal. It looks like they're coordinating their attacks." Sarah's heart raced. "Can you tap into it? We might learn their plans." "I'll do my best," Darnak replied, fingers flying over the console. The air crackled with anticipation as the delegates held their ground, fending off the attackers while Darnak worked. The Kaldari assailants seemed relentless, but as Darnak continued to manipulate the console, the tide of battle began to shift. He managed to bypass several layers of encryption, and soon, a stream of static cleared to reveal voices crackling through the speaker. Detonate the charges in 15 minutes. We need to create more chaos at the celebration. A voice commanded, cold and authoritative. Secure the exits and take any survivors hostage. Sarah exchanged a glance with Darnak, her stomach churning. They're planning to blow up the remaining exits and trap everyone inside. We need to warn the others. Darnak nodded, a determined glint in his eye. I can send out a warning. Wait, Sarah interrupted. Let's listen in a little longer. We need to know what else they're planning. They listened intently, hearts pounding, as the Kaldari leader continued issuing orders. The ambassador's team must be eliminated. They're rallying resistance, and we cannot afford to let them interfere. Ambassador Holt must be dealt with immediately. Another voice chimed in. We'll send in more troops to ensure our control over this operation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They had targeted her specifically. We need to take that information back to the Federation, she whispered to Darnak. It proves their intentions. But first, we need to counteract their attack. Got it. I'll send out a warning as soon as I can, Darnak replied, his focus unwavering. But we'll need a distraction to get out of this room. Otherwise, we'll be sitting ducks. Sarah's mind raced. We'll create a diversion, draw their attention away from the main room. If we can lure them into the hallway, we might have a chance to escape and regroup. The Xylorian delegate stepped forward, a determined look in his eyes. I can help with that. My people can create a controlled explosion to draw them away. Do it, Sarah replied, admiration welling in her chest. But we need to be quick. Darnak, can you finish sending that signal while we set up the distraction? Yes, just give me a moment. Darnak's fingers flew over the console, and as the Xylorian delegate gathered materials to craft the explosive distraction, Sarah rallied the rest of the group. Listen up. We're going to create a diversion in the hallway to draw the Kaldari out of here. Once we do, we'll slip past them and regroup in the main corridor. The delegates nodded, determination etched on their faces. They quickly moved to fortify the hallway, stacking materials and positioning themselves strategically. On my count, Sarah shouted. 3, 2, 1. With a loud crash, the Xylorian delegate set off the controlled explosion, smoke billowing into the hallway. Shouts erupted from the Kaldari assailants, their attention diverted as they rushed toward the commotion. Now, go, Sarah yelled, leading the charge into the smoky hallway. They sprinted through the chaos, adrenaline surging as they made their way toward the exit. As they burst through the doors, Sarah glanced back at the scene. The Kaldari were momentarily disoriented, providing the opening they needed. Keep moving, she urged, her heart racing. They were on the brink of reclaiming their momentum, and she knew they had to seize this moment. Justice was within reach, and she would not let it slip away. The atmosphere shifted as Sarah and her makeshift strike team emerged from the safety of the building, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The chaotic sounds of battle echoed around them, but a singular purpose united their disparate forces. The Citadel, a tall structure at the heart of the plaza, loomed ahead, its windows darkened, likely filled with Kaldari operatives coordinating the attack. Stay sharp, Sarah urged, her voice steady. We'll split into 2 groups. Darnak, you take half of our team and create a diversion at the east entrance. The rest of us will flank from the west and aim for the control room. We need to cut off their communication lines fast. Darnak nodded, his eyes brimming with confidence. We'll cause a scene and draw their attention. They won't know what hit them. As they approached the Citadel, the tension in the air thickened. Sarah could see Kaldari soldiers patrolling the perimeter, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning for threats. She gestured for her team to lower their profiles, moving stealthily through the shadows. "On my mark," she whispered, glancing at Darnek, who gave her a subtle nod. 3, 2, 1. Darnek and his team erupted into action, launching makeshift explosives at the east entrance. Bright flashes and deafening booms rang out as the Kaldari soldiers turned, startled and disoriented. "Go! Go!" Sarah shouted, sprinting toward the west side of the citadel with her group. They ducked behind cover, hearts pounding in unison. As they reached the side entrance, Sarah peered through a shattered window. Inside, chaos reigned. Kaldari soldiers scrambled to respond to the explosion, confusion clouding their ranks. This was their moment. "Now," she commanded, bursting through the door with her team, weapons at the ready. They stormed in, taking advantage of the chaos to neutralize the startled guards quickly. The Kaldari, caught off guard, didn't stand a chance against their united front. "Clear the way," Sarah shouted, pushing deeper into the building. They navigated through hallways adorned with the Kaldari insignia, their resolve growing stronger with each step. Almost there, Darnek's voice crackled through her communicator. "We're creating as much distraction as we can. Just hold on." They rounded a corner and found themselves at a control room, its screens flickering with real-time updates of the battle outside. Kaldari soldiers scrambled to regain control, their faces a mix of panic and frustration. "Take positions," Sarah ordered, and her team spread out, taking cover behind consoles and equipment. "We need to take control of this room." Just then, a Kaldari officer, recognizing the breach, raised his weapon. "Intruders, secure the control room." A firefight erupted, the air filled with the sharp crackle of energy weapons. Sarah ducked behind a console, her heart racing. "Focus fire on the officer," she yelled, and her team directed their weapons toward the commanding Kaldari soldier. In a burst of coordinated fire, they took him down. The remaining soldiers, now leaderless, hesitated, creating an opening for Sarah and her allies to push forward. "Now to the consoles," Darnek shouted, rushing toward the main control panel. "I'll shut down their communications and access their systems." Sarah covered him, firing at the remaining Kaldari soldiers who tried to regroup. She could feel the tide turning. Their unity and resolve were overpowering the Syndicate's disarray. Darnek worked furiously, his hands flying over the controls. "I'm in. This is their command network. I can lock them out of their own systems." The Kaldari soldiers, realizing they were losing ground, began to fall back, but Sarah's team pressed forward, pushing them toward the exits. "Don't let them escape," she shouted, determination igniting her every word. As Darnek completed his work, the screens around them flickered with warnings. "I've cut them off. They're blind now," he declared triumphantly. A cheer erupted from their ranks, but Sarah remained focused. "We need to finish this. Let's clear the remaining forces and secure the citadel." With renewed vigor, they surged forward, driving the Kaldari back. The sounds of the battle outside began to shift as well. Their allies were capitalizing on the Syndicate's confusion, rallying against the remaining forces. Finally, the last of the Kaldari soldiers fell back, and a tense silence enveloped the control room. Sarah turned to her team, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "We did it. We've taken the citadel." But even as they celebrated their victory, she knew this was only the beginning. The Kaldari Syndicate wouldn't take this defeat lightly. They would fight back, and Sarah was determined to ensure that the Federation stood united against any future threats. Justice was not just a dream. It was a battle they were ready to continue. As the dust settled in the citadel, the air hung heavy with a mix of triumph and uncertainty. Sarah surveyed the control room, now a symbol of their hard-fought victory. Delegates gathered around, eyes wide with disbelief and excitement, but the tension remained palpable. The Kaldari Syndicate had been dealt a blow, but their future actions loomed ominously over the Federation. "Darnek, what's the status on the network?" Sarah asked, stepping closer to the console. The screens flickered, displaying the chaos outside, where their allies had taken control of the plaza. "I've secured access to their systems," Darnik replied, his expression serious. "But we need to alert the Federation Council about what we've uncovered, specifically the Calderi's intentions to destabilize this celebration. We can't let this go unanswered." "Right," Sarah nodded, a sense of urgency creeping into her voice. "We need to communicate our findings and ensure they understand the threat we're facing. This is a turning point for humanity in the Federation. We must stand united." With Darnek's help, they began to draft a message, detailing everything they had learned about the Calderi Syndicate's plans and the evidence they had collected. As the message took shape, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had not just defended their place in the galaxy, they had proven that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. "Captain Jameson, how's the situation outside?" Sarah turned to the captain, who had been overseeing the perimeter with a group of delegates. "It's stabilizing," he replied, his face lined with determination. "The Calderi forces are retreating, and our allies are regrouping. They'll need to know what happened here." "Then let's make sure they do," Sarah said, finishing the message. With a final flourish, she hit send, and the message shot out into the galaxy, destined for the Federation Council. The room erupted into cheers as delegates realized the full weight of their victory. They had not only defended themselves, they had thwarted a significant threat, but Sarah knew this was merely the beginning. "Listen up," she called, raising her hands to quiet the crowd. "We've achieved something remarkable today, but we must remain vigilant. The Caldari will regroup, and they will come back for us. We need to prepare for the next stage." A Xylorian delegate stepped forward, his voice steady. "We should strengthen our alliances. This attack was a wake-up call. We must ensure our defenses are unified and our communication is seamless." "Agreed," Sarah replied. "We must also advocate for stronger measures within the Federation Council. We need to hold those responsible accountable and prevent further sabotage." Darnak added, "We can use the data we've collected to expose the Calderi's internal workings. If we can show their weaknesses, we can rally more support against them." As they discussed strategies and next steps, Sarah felt a sense of camaraderie among the delegates. This moment marked a turning point, not just for humanity, but for the entire Federation. They were no longer just disparate species navigating a complex galaxy. They were a united front against tyranny. Hours later, as night fell over Viridian, the celebration had transformed. What had begun as a day of joy had evolved into a solemn acknowledgement of their shared strength. Delegates gathered in the plaza, now fortified and lit with colorful lights, their spirits lifted by the resilience they had shown. "We honor those we lost today," Sarah said, addressing the crowd. "We honor the spirit of unity that has brought us together, despite our differences. Let this moment stand as a testament to what we can achieve when we fight for one another." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of hope washing over them. In that moment, they were not just representatives of their species, they were guardians of a brighter future. As Sarah looked around at her fellow delegates, she felt a sense of pride swell within her. They had weathered a storm together and emerged stronger. With the Caldari Syndicate on notice, and the Federation united in purpose, she knew they were embarking on a new era, one where justice would reign and their voices would resonate throughout the galaxy. And she vowed to lead that charge, ensuring that humanity and their allies would always stand ready to defend their future. Together, they would build a legacy worth fighting for.